Looking for magic cards? At flipsidegaming.com you can now use the promo code LVD to get a 10% discount on orders over $10 while supporting the channel at the same time. Hello and welcome to another sealed deck building exercise. Today we're taking a look at Core Set 2019, so we will be opening 6 booster packs and then trying to build a 40 card sealed deck. So let's get started here. And in our first pack, let's zoom in a bit. We start out with Trumpet Blast, Trusty Pack Beast, Omen Speaker, Lava Axe, Highland Game, Two-Headed Zombie, Rock's Oracle, Macabre Waltz, Sparktongue Dragon, Wall of Vines, Diamond Mare as our first uncommon, Vine Mare, Horizon Scholar, and our rare is Mystic Archaeologist. Sweet. Pack number 2. Where we start with a Goblin Motivator, Daybreak Chaplain, Scholar of Stars, Tormenting Voice, Daggerback Basilisk, Infernal Scarring, Essence Scatter, Naturalize, Strangling Spores, Totally Lost. Our first uncommon is a Psychic Corrosion, Rogue's Gloves, Militia Bugler, and our rare is an Infernal Reckoning. And we get a Highland Lake in our land slot. Time for pack number 3. Where we have a Sure Strike, Mighty Leap, Omen Speaker, Goblin Instigator, another Daggerback Basilisk, another Infernal Scarring, Crash Through, Aven Windmage, Cavalry Drillmaster, another Sparktongue Dragon, Aegis of the Heavens as our first uncommon, Regal Bloodlord, Herald of Faith, and our rare is Isolate. Alright. Time for pack number 4. Where we have a Catalyst Elemental, Rustwing Falcon, Tolarian Scholar, Act of Treason, Bristling Boar, Bog Stomper, Greenwood Sentinel, Hired Blade, another Naturalize, another Strangling Spores, a Jani's Welcome as our first uncommon, a Gravedigger, and a Dried Greenseeker, and a rare is Gigantosaurus. Sweet. Alright, time for pack number 5. Where we have a Loxodon, a Linebreaker, Frilled Sea Serpent, Titanic Growth, Infectious Horror, Pegasus Courser, Smelt, Druid of the Cowl, Sky Scanner, Snapping Drake, a Lich's Caress, Ravenous Harpy as our first uncommon, a Jani's Pridemate, Sleep, and our rare is Mistcaller. And we get a Woodland Stream for our Lancelot. Time for our last pack. Where we have an Onake Ogre, another Mighty Leap, another Titanic Growth, another Infectious Horror, Ghost Form, Electrify, Walking Corpse, Angel of the Dawn, Vaishino Pyromancer, Salvager of Secrets, Druid of Horns as our first uncommon, Murder, Exclusion Mage, and our rare is Sarkhan's Unsealing. Alright, so I've sorted all the cards by color, and within each color I've sorted creatures and non-creatures, so we can get a better understanding of all the strengths and weaknesses within each color. So let's take a look at the white cards here, where we have some decent creatures, especially Pegasus Courser stands out, a Jani's Pridemate with enough synergies can be quite strong, and the 5-mana Angels, Herald of Faith and Angel of the Dawn are quite strong. So we've got some pretty decent creatures in white. Then looking at the non-creature spells, they're pretty disappointing. A Jani's Welcome only really works if you have a ton of synergies with them, but in Seal that's going to be difficult to make work, since you don't really get to pick the cards in your deck. Isolate's not especially good, and then Double Mighty Leap as tricks, better than Aegis. So white looks okay, it's got some nice angels at 5 mana, but not the most exciting color so far. Let's take a look at blue, where Mistcaller sadly is not a very good rare, but the Archaeologist certainly is. Double Omen Speaker can help us smooth out our draw. Exclusion Mage is definitely very good. We've got a few flyers, and Horizon Scholar especially, a very nice 6-mana card. And then taking a look at the non-creatures, we've got an Essence Scatter, which is always nice. Psychic Corrosion in case we want to try and make a mill deck work, or maybe want to side into a mill deck for the slower matchups. And a Sleep can be nice in a more aggressive deck. So overall blue looks pretty solid. We've got a few flyers, which is nice for evasion, and then a few card draw spells with the Archaeologist. So don't hate the look of blue. Taking a look at black, the creature department is definitely lacking, the only exciting creature being Gravedigger, and to a lesser extent Ravenous Harpy in the right archetype. But non-creature spells are pretty powerful, since we have a Waltz, which is always nice and sealed, getting back a few creatures in the late game, discarding a land. And then mainly these 4 removal spells, Murder, Double Strangling Spores, and Lich's Caress. Those are all quality removal spells that I would be very happy to play. So it's going to be tricky whether or not we can end up playing black, or if we just end up splashing black or including a few of those removal spells, since the creatures themselves are definitely not that exciting. Moving on to red, we have Double Sparktongue Dragon, which is definitely exciting, a nice 5-mana card, but also a nice 8-mana card. The rest of the creatures are definitely lacking, and then the non-creature spells, We've got a Sarkhan's Unsealing, which is quite strong if we have enough 4-power creatures to support it, and Electrify as a nice removal spell that's also splashable. So red also doesn't look very deep, so it's going to be tricky whether or not we can play these red cards, or if we just splash Electrify and Sarkhan's Unsealing. Moving on to green. We have some exciting 2-drops in Dried Green Seeker and Druid of the Cowl. 2 Basilisks is fine. Some bigger creatures here in Bristling Boar, Vinemare is exciting. Rock's Oracle is always okay. Gigantosaurus is difficult to support unless you're mono green, which doesn't look to be the case. And then we have 2 Titanic Growths and 2 Naturalizes. So green's got some okay cards, but it might not be deep enough to include it, but we'll see, since Dried Green Seeker is a very powerful card and I would like to play it. Then as far as mana fixing goes, we only have our 2 dual lands. We did not pick up any Manaliths or Dragon Swords or other mana fixing. The artifacts, we have a Diamond Mare, Rogue's Gloves and Skyscanner. Skyscanner is always solid. Diamond Mare, if we have enough synergies going, could be okay. And the Rogue's Gloves, if we have a lot of evasive creatures, can definitely pull us ahead. And then for multicolor cards, we only have a Regal Bloodlord, which is quite powerful and might be worth jumping through some hoops to make the Bloodlord more powerful. So we'll see. Alright, now that we've looked at all the colors, it's time to start building some decks. So I wouldn't mind trying some sort of black-white deck with a life gain theme and see if we can get there, if we have enough playables in these colors, or if we need to splash some other cards as well. So we'll start there and then we'll try some other color combinations to see which one looks the best. So I'll be right back. Alright, we're back. So this is how the black-white deck could look like. We've got 23 cards laid out in front of us, which means we can just play 17 lands and have a nice 40-card deck. So let's quickly go over the deck. So we've got our Rustwing Falcon, which is actually more playable than it seemed at first. And we also have the Rogue's Gloves to equip it to help us draw some cards. So I think the Falcon might be an okay inclusion in this deck. Then in the 2-drops we've got Diamond Mare, since we do have some life gain synergies to go with it, including of course the Ajani's Bridemate. We've got a Drill Master, which is an okay 2-drop if we're somewhat aggressive, which this deck I think wants to be, as well as a Daybreak Chaplain, which has some more of the life gain synergies, although we could arguably replace the Chaplain with something like a Walking Corpse, for example, if we're more interested in having some additional power. But of course Walking Corpse not the most exciting card, and at least life gain synergies with a Chaplain could make something pretty powerful happen. Then in the 3-drops we've got Skyscanner, just as a nice 3-drop that also has some small synergies in the deck. For example, we can find it with our Bugler, which is also quite strong, since a lot of the powerful cards in this deck also have power 2 or less. For example, Gravedigger or the Bloodlord we can all find with our Bugler. Then we've got Pegasus Courser as a nice card to help us kind of jump our 2-drops as well, so works nicely with a card like Chaplain if we have a Pridemate to help us gain more life and make the Pridemate bigger, at which point we can maybe just start attacking with a giant Pridemate in the air. Also works very nicely with our Rogue's Gloves. We also have a trusty Pack Beast, since we do have quite a few artifacts in this deck. We've got the Diamond Mare and Skyscanner that can easily end up in the graveyard, as well as the Rogue's Gloves that the opponent might want to kill, especially after sideboard. And it's also another creature we can find with our Militia Bugler, unlike something like the Loxodon Lightbreaker. Then in the 4-drops we have 2-headed Zombie and Gravedigger, and I think 2-headed Zombie is actually quite nice in this deck, not only as an aggressive creature, but also it trades off very often for the opponent, since they can't afford to keep taking 4, and with the Gravedigger and Macabre Waltz we have a lot of ways to recur creatures from our graveyard. And then the 5-drops are the exciting part in this deck. We've got a Regal Bloodlord, Herald of Faith and Angel of the Dawn, and of course Herald of Faith works very nicely with Regal Bloodlord and a Ajani's Bridemate. And we also have a Bog Stomper as another Curve Topper. And then in the non-creature spells we've got 4 great removal spells, Murder, Double Strangling Spores and Licious Caress, which also has some nice incidental life gain. And then of course a Waltz to recur some creatures, Rogue's Gloves to go with our flyers to draw some extra cards, and Double Mighty Leap as a nice combat trick to help our small creatures get through and maybe keep connecting with some of our life gain synergies. So the black-white deck doesn't look bad. At first I thought we were going to be short on creatures, but in the end I think we've got an okay set of creatures here, especially some of the uncommons are quite powerful. So this deck could definitely work, backed up by these powerful black removal spells. So I'm not too sad to potentially play this black-white deck, and I don't think we can really splash anything in this deck, since while Electrify would be okay, don't really have any red mana fixing to go with black-white, and Sargon's Unsealing also looks quite bad in this deck since we have very few creatures with power 4 or greater. So I don't think we really need to splash anything. Could potentially splash Horizon Scholar out of blue, but again, no mana fixing, and I don't think it's really necessary since we already have quite a few flyers in black-white. So if we can get away with just playing 2 colors and have a better mana base, that's always nice. Alright, so this was black-white. Let's see if we can make some other color combinations work. Maybe take a look at blue-black, since we have the black removal spells, and then in blue we had some pretty exciting creatures as well. So we'll be right back. Alright, so this is how the blue-black deck would look like. Right now we only have 21 cards laid out in front of us, so we still need to add 2 more cards if we want to play 17 lands. But first let's take a look at the entire list to get a better understanding of how the deck operates. So at 2 mana we've got 2 copies of Omen Speaker to help us smooth out our draw and provide an early blocker against more aggressive decks, even though those are rare in sealed usually. We've got a Mystic Archaeologist to draw a lot of cards in the late game, so that's great. And then at 3 mana we have a bunch of flyers in Sky Scanner, Ravenous Harpy, and Aven Windmage, and Exclusion Mage to get a little bit of tempo going. And here I did include the Ravenous Harpy where I didn't include it in the black-white deck, just because we have a few more disposable creatures like Omen Speaker in the late game, and a lot of Graveyard Recursion as well still. And then the extra flyer also works nicely with our Rogue's Gloves. Then at 4 mana we have our 2-headed zombie and Gravedigger again. We also picked up a Scholar of Stars, only have the 2 artifacts sadly, but it could still be worth it. And a Snapping Drake for another flyer. At 5 mana we have a Salvager of Secrets, which works very nicely with all our black removal spells. And at 6 mana we have Horizon Scholar as a nice finisher, as well as Frilled Sea Serpent, which took the place of the Box Stomper. Then looking at the non-creature spells, we've got our Rogue's Gloves to go with all our flyers to get a little bit of card draw going. We've got our Macabre Waltz for Graveyard Recursion, Acid Scatter to counter creatures, as well as Murder, Double Strangling Spores, and Lich's Caress to deal with opposing creatures as well. So the removal package is definitely very exciting in this deck. And that means we still need to add 2 more cards to the deck, and here are the cards I'm considering. So we could just play another 6-drop in Box Stomper, although the curve is starting to get pretty high at that point. We could play another Totally Lost to have some more creature interaction, although I don't think we really need it with all the black removal we already have. The main argument being we have another non-creature spell to get back with our Salvager of Secrets. We could just play one of these filler 3-drops like Tolarian Scholar or Hired Blade, just to have more creatures in the early game. Maybe trade them off, get them back with the Waltz or the Gravedigger. Or we could just play a Walking Corpse if we really want to lower our curve. And we could also be playing Sleep, which is a very powerful card, but not necessarily in this kind of deck where we already have a bunch of evasive creatures and the power on the creatures is pretty low. So if we can tap down the opponent's creatures for 2 turns, we unlikely get to kill our opponents in the time that their creatures are tapped down. So it's a lot better in, let's say, blue-green, for example. But it might still be worth it here just to buy a lot of time, keep the opponent's creatures tapped down, get in for some damage, and then finish them off with our flyers. So I could definitely see including Sleep just because it's such a powerful card when it works. And then we probably just want to add something like a Hired Blade, since it goes nicely with our Sleep as a 3-power creature that can get in for a bit of damage. It also trades off easily, so that's good with our Gravedigger and Macabre Waltz, so we can get it back from the graveyard. But maybe we would be fine just playing another 6-drop or a Totally Lost here. Those could also be options. Then we could also consider splashing red in this deck, since we do have the Highland Lake, so we could potentially splash something like an Electrify to have an extra removal spell, although I don't think it's really necessary given all the black removal spells we already have in the deck. And I don't think we can really consider Sargon's Unsealing, since we have so few creatures with power 4 or greater. We just have our 6-drops essentially, and our 2-headed zombie that can trigger the Unsealing, so that doesn't seem like a worthwhile inclusion. But otherwise the Unsealing can definitely be a very powerful card in something like red-green, where you have a lot of beefy creatures to trigger it. So I don't think splashing red is really going to be necessary in this build, but certainly something worth considering. So it's unclear whether blue-black is better than black-white at this point. The blue cards do offer Mystic Archaeologist, Horizon Scholar, and Salvager of Secrets in combination with the black removal spells is definitely exciting. So Blue definitely has a lot going for it, but we do miss out on the 5 mana angels in white and some of those powerful life gain synergies. So right now I'm leaning towards blue-black over black-whites, since the blue cards seem to offer a better late game plan with all the card selection and card draw, but let's keep exploring our options and maybe take a look at what the green or the red cards have to offer, so we'll be right back. Alright, so this is how a red-green splashing blue deck could look like, since we do have the Woodland Stream and Highland Lake to help us easily splash blue, and splashing a card like Horizon Scholar is definitely worth it. Also happens to synergize very nicely with the Sarkhan's Unsealing, but I soon realized that we probably don't have enough creatures with power 4 or greater to make our Sarkhan's Unsealing work, since right now I think we just have the 5 creatures. We've got Onake Ogre, Bristling Boar, Vinemare, Rock Circle and Horizon Scholar, which I think is a few creatures short of having a good Sarkhan's Unsealing deck, since I would like to have somewhere upwards of 7 creatures with power 4 or greater to have it be worthwhile. And at that point, if we're not even playing the Sarkhan's Unsealing, then why are we playing red? And if we're not playing red, then the green cards by themselves aren't really all that exciting apart from the Giant Green Seeker, so I think this color combination is probably just weaker than the ones we've tried before. Something I did fail to mention when discussing the blue-black deck is that we could potentially bring in a Woodland Stream out of the sideboard alongside 1 or 2 copies of Naturalize if we need to deal with some problematic artifacts or enchantments, so that's another angle that the blue-black deck has over the black-white deck, making it even more powerful. So I think I would go with the blue-black deck as my final choice, but out of curiosity I want to quickly lay out maybe a blue-white deck and see if we can maybe splash some of the black removal spells in blue-white and see if that's workable, so I'll be right back. So I quickly laid out the blue-white deck splashing black, so this is how it would look like. Obviously we have way more flyers than in either blue-black or black-white, which is a nice upgrade, but we do have a lot less interaction in the non-creature spell department, and we also have to splash black, which is going to make our mana base quite a bit worse. The other option would be to just splash red instead of black, since we do have the Highland Lake, but then we would only be having the extra Electrify instead of double Strangling Spores, and then we could add something like a Scholar of Stars back into the deck, although we do still have only the 2 artifacts to go with it. So those are the other options we have, but again, I think just efficient black removal spells are definitely a reason to stay in black as one of our primary colors, even though we have maybe fewer flyers than in blue-white. So blue-black would be my final choice, but we do always have the option of sideboarding into the black-white or even the blue-white deck if we think it matches up better against what the opponent is doing. So that's gonna do it for this sealed deck building exercise. I wanna thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day. I also want to thank all my patrons for supporting the channel, and you can do so yourself as well over at patreon.com/LegenVD, where you get cool rewards for supporting the channel, as well as getting us closer to our goals, where with every goal reached, we will release an additional weekly series. So if you want to see more content, Patreon is the place to go.